Okay, it's 5:30. Good evening, doctors. Tonight we are going to we are invited SIN Dental USA CEO Dr. Patrick Duroy to give out the webinar. He will talking about the photo geometry. This is the new technique, and actually not very new, but it's a very powerful technique for the full arch reconstruction. So I think last week we supposed to have this webinar on Sunday, but for some reason, but it's my fault. I'm in the Bay Area. So today, let me introduce Patrick Duoy to give our the webinar, and after the webinar, we'll have the Q&A session. Okay, it's your turn.
Excellent. Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Patrick Dewey. I'm the founder and president of SIN Dental USA. We are in the transition of our brand name to SIN 360, which you will see why here in just a few minutes. So from what I understand, the ultimate goal and agenda for this evening is to take everybody on a journey through what digital workflows are in relation to full arch fixed restorations. There's a specific piece of technology that allows us to utilize modelless digital workflows when it comes to full mouth rehabilitation. And that is exactly what was mentioned earlier, is the photogrammetry technology. We have been one of the longest distributors, trainers, and developers of photogrammetry in the US. We currently have the only globally DSAP approved photogrammetry unit, which is the Micron Mapper, but we are very familiar with all of the photogrammetry devices on the market. And yeah, so without further ado, my goal here is to walk you through step-by-step a complete case that is a double arch fixed restoration. And then I'll do some deep dives specifically on each individual piece of a modelless digital workflow that takes you through the journey, both behind the scenes, what the designers do with exocad and digital design, and how that pieces everything together to make it easy, simple, and efficient for your practice to treat patients with full arch fixed restorations. So it's going to be quite complex at times, because I'm going to talk about not just what happens from the patient's perspective and the clinician's perspective, but I'm also going to go deep into what happens behind the scenes, again, when it comes down to the exocad side. So without further ado, let me go ahead and get started here. One second. Okay, so at SIN 360, we are a very unique company. They'll give you a little bit of background of who we are, that way you know exactly where we're coming from. My background is around 18 years in implant dentistry. I've been with Noble Biocare, founded and launched Neodent in the US in 2015, and left as the Straumann Group's Vice President of Marketing in 2020. Started this operation in 2021, and our entire team is focused on all aspects of full mouth reconstruction and implant dentistry, with an emphasis on digital, whether it's a single implant that you're using scan bodies to create a CAD/CAM restoration, or whether you're 3D printing your restorations, or if it's full arch fixed, we're still going completely modelless and digital. So this image here is our ethos. This is all the products that we sell, train, and support on. So if somebody is dealing with one specific piece of technology, which may be photogrammetry, we can help them with all aspects because they are all interconnected. So this is SIN 360. One of the key aspects, as I've mentioned twice already, is the exocad course. Education and training is one of the key aspects of our company. We have an exocad course. This isn't to sell the exocad course, but I will show you it because it is absolutely critical that if it's not through us, whether it's through some other trainer, learning exocad is very critical to the success of this. And if you don't learn it directly, then partnering with a laboratory that knows exocad specifically is also going to be very critical in this process. So here's one of the courses that we offer just to show you how big this is. These courses are also sold out here at our headquarters. They're sold out until November. So there's quite a few courses on the market, but we highly recommend learning about them. Okay, so you'll see this is a big part of both our marketing, our education, our internal operation, because it is essential from taking one of these cases step by step, completely digital. So at this point, I'm going to walk through a very specific case that was done by one of our ambassadors, Dr. Rajan Sheth out of Scottsdale, Arizona. And let's start here from now. So in the beginning, when you have a patient that walks into your practice, you have two means of capturing proper records for face scans or 2D photos. So if you take 2D photos, you need to make sure that the eyes are open and that the pupils are visible in the photos, and all the photos are from the same distance away. They use these photos, again, in exocad to align the midline, the cant, and the bite. The reason that it's critical that the eyes are open is because in the Smile Design software, they'll utilize the pupils as a reference so they can pull up the golden proportion ratio grid and make sure everything is perfectly symmetrical. So when you take 2D photos, you want to capture a series of usually 5 photos. Straight on resting lip position, exaggerated smile, retracted smile, or sorry, just retracted, then 2 side profile shots. That's usually enough for your designer to take that case and start doing a digital wax up. Now, in the event if you have a 3D facial scanner, again, it is imperative that the eyes are open and the pupils are accessible. Up until 2 months ago, 3 months ago, 3D face scanners were not actually fully implemented in exocad because they didn't have a 3-dimensional Smile Design software to access that smile grid, that golden proportion grid. Now that is in beta testing, we do train on it. That is something that is becoming everly more popular. So both 3D facial scans and good quality 2D photos can be just enough to get you through one of these cases. So after you capture your 3D facial scans or 2D photos, the next piece of diagnostic data that you'll need is intraoral scans with an intraoral scanner. So there's a lot of people ask us what type of intraoral scanners are applicable for this. Now, on the pre-op stage, when there's natural teeth being present, it's very common that most scanners will do the job just fine. On the post-operative scan, after all the teeth are gone, there's a lot of blood, a lot of saliva, and a lot of alveoloplasty, meaning the bone's been reduced. Especially in the mandibular jaw, there's a lot of mobility with the tissue. Therefore, it limits the available intraoral scanners that will actually work effectively to only a few. The ones that we find to work most commonly are going to be any of the Trios units, like a Trios 3 or a Trios 5 wireless. The Shining 3D products are phenomenal, including their Shining 3D's wireless aoral scan. You can also use Medit. CareStream is quite challenging on the post-op scans, and we always get asked very constantly because there's a lot of units on the market about iTero. iTero does work. iTero on the post-op scans is very challenging because it's going to auto-stitch a lot of that tissue out. So it will remove it, even if you turn off the AI software. I highly recommend, in the event if you have an intraoral scanner that doesn't capture bloody environments and long spans of soft tissue well, to just snap an alginate, scan the alginate, and send that to your lab, because that will be applicable. Okay, so we've captured photos or 2D or 3D scans, and we've captured our intraoral scans, upper scan, lower scan, and a bite. It is very, very important that that bite is repeatable and it is matching what's in the patient's mouth. So what you see on the screen is exactly how the patient is presenting. What's unique is when you go to the surgical situation and you go to actually sit down and do surgery, the first thing that you notice that's different is on the bottom left, we have a bone fixation screw kit. I will get into that in just a moment. And the top right are the bone fixation screws, and you'll see a white sleeve that is 3D printed that we have a design of, and we'll put them around these bone fixation screws. These are very, very critical because these are going to be what we relate the post-op scans to the pre-op bite. That way we have a reference to the proper vertical. Now, on the left, you'll notice that we've printed what we refer to as MUA guides, so multi-unit guides. This is going to ensure, after implant and multi-unit abutment placement, that we can verify that there's no facial access holes coming out because of the way the implant or the multi-units are positioned in the mouth. So at this point, we'll check these before we torque down our abutments using these guides, and you'll see this here in just a few slides. The first step before we extract any of the teeth or do any surgery is we're going to make a pilot hole in the midline of the palate, and we're going to place 2 fiducial screws. These are known as either bone fixation screws or fiducial markers. Here's the case. We're placing our first one. We do need to make sure that both of these bone fixation screws that we place are outside of the surgical zone, because we need them in the exact same spot preoperatively as postoperatively. We don't want them to move. We don't want them to rotate.
Excuse me, I don't see your slides. Do you show us the slides? I only see your person. I just see you talking.
Yeah,
I don't see anything else.
we can see the slide. You check. My side is perfect.
Okay.
I don't see a slide.
Yeah, you may need to change the configuration of the Zoom box.
Okay.
Yeah, if
Thank
you
you.
use the cell phone, you swipe your cell phone to have a look.
Okay, now I
go
see
ahead.
it. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Okay, so
Hmm.
again, we're placing 2 fiducial markers in the midline of the palate. Again, we want to make sure they're out of the surgery zone. So when you do reduce bone and you lay that tissue back for a full flap, that you do not bump, move, or reorientate these screws. So another thing you'll notice is that we place 2 in the midline of the palate. Technically, from a designer perspective, they only need 1, but we put 2 because Murphy's Law shows up. Things happen, and we have to make sure we build a scalable model to where we can always deliver teeth with a good midline, with the right cant, and the bite that fits perfectly. So 2 palatal reference markers on the upper. On the lower, we're going to place 2 fiducial markers on the retromolar pads, 2 on each side. Now, in the event, if one of those comes loose on the bottom, that's going to leave us with 3. The reason that's okay is because we need triangulation. If you have just 2 screws, you can get a hinging effect and things can be distorted. So it's important we have 3 points of reference so we can match an exocad, and I will show this here in just a few slides. After you've placed your retromolar pad screws and your midline palatal screws, it is important that we check the bite. You want to make sure that nothing is changing the bite from your original pre-op records without any of the screws. So that's what this is here. We're including the patient, making sure we have that repeatable bite, and everything is still closing down properly. Everything looks good. We're going to proceed forward. Here's Dr. Shep. He's taking his upper intraoral scan. This is the morning of surgery, immediately after he's placed his 2 fiducial bone fixation screw markers in the palate and on the retromolar pads. Now, when you take these preoperative scans, you want to make sure that you capture the entire palate, capture the vestibule, capture the entire retromolar pad. As much natural anatomy as possible is what you want to capture here. Here, when we're capturing the bite again, we have to make sure that visually how the bite shows up on the computer matches what's in the patient's mouth. It's very common for specifically trios that you'll capture a bite, everything looks perfect in the screen, and then when it optimizes, one of the sides will pop open. So if you have to, in trios specifically, if you have to manually go in there and correct for the bite, you can, but just remember you want an accurate bite because that's the vertical, that's the digital articulation we're gonna build the case on. So here we've got the entire upper, lower, and bite. Then we're going to send both the facial photos, the 5 key photos, or a 3D face scan with the intraoral scans to whoever's doing the design team. A lot of our customers have in-office labs where we've either trained them on exocad or they've learned exocad from somewhere else. So even if you're just going to send them to the next room or send them to another computer, this is just organizing the files that you're going to send. Okay, now after we've captured our pre-op records, we can then begin to extract all the teeth. What is unique compared to the old analog way, instead of having to convert the upper first using the palate as a reference, and then doing surgery on the lower and retrofitting a denture onto the lower into the palate, or excuse me, into the upper, which is already set, you can do both arches simultaneously. It speeds up the process significantly. Now, obviously, if you have a medically compromised patient, there's things that you need to consider when doing so. And this is not surgery advice. This is just more or less walking you through the workflow. All right, both upper and lowers have been extracted. Now we're going to lay a full flap on the maxillary arch. Again, we have to be cognizant of those bone fixation screws that are in the midline of the palate. And I will kind of go through the surgery portion a little bit quick. That's not our emphasis today. Primarily, we're focused on the digital workflow, but it is very important that you see the surgical steps from how Dr. Sheth does it, because he does it very properly. And this is, he's very cognizant to make sure he doesn't mess with those landmarks that we need in the same orientation and same position preoperatively as postoperatively. Now, Dr. Sheth is going to go through his 2-stage bone reduction. He uses one of those standard acrylic burrs for his first phase of alveoloplasty, as you'll see here. He's going around the arch. Now he also uses a zirconia burr for his final finishing of his bone reduction. And just because this doesn't dissipate a lot of heat, and it also doesn't get clogged up with bone. It's a very nice burr. Dr. Sheth always likes to clean out his extraction sites. Now he's going to reference his CT scan, and he's going to try to angulate those distal implants to maximize his AP spread. So one thing that Dr. Sheth does almost every single time in the maxillary arch is he's going to prep his distal osteotomies first, then he's going to split the difference in the anterior. Okay, and I'm gonna move a little bit fast through the surgery part. He's just going through his drilling sequence phase. I will show you the implant here in just a sec that he's going to place. Now he's going to go in with the depth probe, make sure he didn't perforate into the sinus, and he can measure the depth of the osteotomy to confirm the implant that he's going to place. One thing that you'll also notice, because he is using our implant system, with our implant system, it's a Morris taper connection, so he is going to place the implant subcrustal as well. Here's the implant system that we're using today in this case. So the line is called the EpiCut S Plus. It's got an HA nano surface, hence the gold hue to it. Now Dr. Sheth is going to place his distal implants first to make sure they get high initial stability in both sites. Then he's going to go to his anterior sites and place his anterior implants. Now you notice the thread pattern on these are very different. It allows him to get a very high initial stability, even in some of the most compromised bone scenarios. Okay. Usually on average, these cases, I think I was in this surgery, they were around 70 to 80 Newton centimeters of torque, which is more than acceptable for a single implant site. So, okay, now he's going to go ahead after his multi-units are on, he's going to pull out his, after his implants are placed, he's going to pull out his multi-units and ensure that he has the proper collar height based on the gingiva thickness. Everything looks good here. Now is when he starts to pull out his multi-unit guide to verify the screw access channel or that handle on the multi-unit is not impinging on the incisal edge or pushing the guide over to the right or the left. Now, it is key that you'll see there's a hole in the midline of the palate that he's cut out so you can have clearance for those bone fixation screws. That is very important that the designers will, what's called, if they're doing all digital, like our designers here, they'll do what's called a Boolean subtraction in like Blender, or they'll do it in Mesh Mixer or some sort of CAD design software. They can easily just subtract that out. And then you could just take that file, put it on your 3D printer, print off one of these guides prior to your surgery. Now, Dr. Sheth is going to go to the anterior sites. You'll notice throughout this, when he does his sites in the anterior, he likes to do the M technique, so he even angles the anterior implants as well. So he's locating each osteotomy wherever the best host bone is, trying to go in approximately between those extraction sites so he has good host bone as much around the implant as possible. Going through his drill sequence, and it's very simple. It's usually a 2 to 3 drill process, depending on the density of the bone, of course. And here gives you a good sight of the good visual of the angulation. All right, he's going to place his anterior implants. Again, he's going to place them subcrestal, about 1 millimeter. And the reason he's able to do that is because of the Morse taper 16-degree connection. It's very stable, so you'll actually see bone growth over the top of the implant. So here's all 4 multi-units in place. This, from a visual perspective, they look great, but we always make it a habit and a rule of thumb to verify with that multi-unit guide to make sure that there's no facial access hole. And that's what's going on here. So everything looks good all the way around. This is very acceptable. You don't want them too close to the incisal edge, and you also don't want them too palatal either. So it's important that you don't have a prosthesis that becomes too bulky and thick. You want them just perfectly, maybe 2 millimeters from the incisal edge. Now he's going to go do the same exact technique, but on the lower arch. Going to lay his lingual flap, his lingual tieback, do his bone reduction, his alveoloplasty. And he's doing the same 2-stage bone reduction technique. There's the site that's prepped, fully exposed, so we can visualize where the good host bone is. He's identified the mental foramen. And he's going to then prep his distal sites first, even on the lower. He's going through multiple extraction sites, so he's capturing that good host bone, that big good cortical bone that's around, that was previously around each of the teeth. Checking his depth gauge. And now he's going to place his implants. Again, his distal implants first, then he's going to go to his anterior sites. And I'm going to fast forward a little bit here. He is going through, placing on his multi-units, and then he's going to place the other implant. little bit hard to visualize this one. There it is. You can see the extreme angulation there. And I will cover some of the multi-units and why it's important to have the proper multi-units to execute these cases with angulation. Now he's again prepping his anterior sites on the mandible, and he's going to sink both his implants subcrustal. It's going to torque them down again around the 50 to 60, sometimes even 80 Newton centimeters of torque. I think we'll see where he's at here. It doesn't show it. Okay, so now I'm going to fast forward here. After all the implants are in, all the multi-units are in, now is where things really take a turn compared to the analog world. First thing we do is pull out our micron mapper because all implants, multi-units are on, they're in the right position. This here is the micron mapper. It is a photogrammetry device. It does one thing, it just does it extremely well, and it captures a digital impression through means of taking lots and thousands of pictures simultaneously to figure out in three-dimensional space exactly where each one of the scan bodies are. Then we take that file, we bring it into ExoCAD, which I'll show you in just a minute. So here's a case. I switch cases on you because we get questions a lot about, can you do cases with pterygoids, very complex, very distal implants? Is it hard capturing them? So that's why I'm showing you this case, because we can take the most compromised cases, most difficult cases, and show you how simple it can be with this technology, the micron mapper. This is what it looks like. It's got two cameras. They're 6.5 megapixel cameras, and the cameras each are they're high caliber cameras that have a processor built into the back of the camera. And it's a very complex device. Internally, it's got algorithms that take into consideration the heat dissipation, or maybe one operatory, the room is at 70 degrees, the other operatory, the room's at 80 degrees. It balances out for that temperature change to make sure no matter what elevation, what temperature, you're always going to get a very, very high precision and accurate scan. Here's the micron mapper. This will give you a real-time example of how long it takes to capture a digital impression. That's going to be within 15, maybe 20 microns in worst case. So, I mean, that's going to be 8 seconds. That's 8 seconds to capture that scan per arch. Extremely accurate, very, very simple. Now, something that's very, very unique is that these scan bodies can be also used for soft tissue scanning, where there's 2 or 3 other cameras out there that are also under the photogrammetry brand. There's iCam 4D, there's PIC, and there's one out of Europe called OXO. Now, the OXO has not really hit the market yet. PIC is pretty much dried up in the US. It just hasn't been a mainstay product that has the big hockey puck flags that can be very difficult to deal with in the mouth. iCam has historically been the more popular one, but this makes it a lot simpler. These are in stock. You don't have to wait 6 months for them. And this is also a lot less expensive. But the big differentiator is the accuracy, but then on top of it, the same scan body for both photogrammetry and soft tissue scanning. So we just leave them in place and you can suture up around them. Now, for my power users out there, or any of you who are on this webinar and you're familiar with this process, I will speak to you guys directly and gals here directly when I say there is an alternative workflow, because anybody in this space appreciates how fast, without compromising the integrity of the restoration, how fast we can deliver a restoration to a patient. We all know how important that is. So those that are power users, like we have a lot of customers that do say 60, 70 arches per month in one practice in an implant center. So they need the ability to expedite the time to teeth. How they do that with the micro mapper is because the same scan body for photogrammetry is also used for the soft tissue scan, we can actually snap an alginate of the patient while they're completely flapped, and then tell the design team, go ahead and add 2 millimeters for tissue pressure. That will take place of the tissue so they can actually get the records to the designers before the doctor even starts suturing up the patient. Sometimes it may take somebody 30 minutes if they're fast, sometimes even up to an hour to suture a double arch, both arches. We can actually have those records on the design table so the digital team can start stitching all the files together in exocad. So by the time they're done suturing, we already have that restoration on the printer printing. And I'll show you here in a minute, we can print within 20 minutes. So on average, if you are a power user, we can actually have you delivering a set of teeth, beautiful set of teeth where everything's spot on within 1 hour from being done with placement of implants and multi-unit. So, okay. Now, if you're not a power user and if you're just getting into this, I would highly recommend just suturing around the multi-unit scan bodies. Those are the white caps here that they're not the ICAM bodies. They're called the micromapper scan bodies. A lot of people call them the QR codes, but we just call them scan bodies. So you'll take your intraoral scanner and capture this scan after the suture's been done. Again, it is important to capture the entire palate, entire retromolar pads, so you can relate those bone fixation screws to the pre-op vertical. And I'll show you that again here in just a moment. Again, this is the Trios 3. You can see even the Trios 3 and this computer that he's using has a 3080 graphics card. Now we recommend the 4090 graphics card, which you can get in a laptop. It changes the fast speed of your intraoral scanner, the higher graphics card that you have. So here we've captured both the upper, lower, soft tissue scans, and we've already captured our photogrammetry scans. Now we're going to send these all off to our design team. So post-op files, what exactly are we sending to the design team? We're sending the micromapper photogrammetry files. We're going to capture the lower scans and the upper scans from your intraoral scanner, or if you're a power user and you just snap alginants, scan the alginants, you're going to send those all over to your exocad designer. Now, everybody, I want you to pause for a moment. I'm going to talk from this phase forward, and then I'll come back. But this is what happens behind the scenes with the exocad design team. So whoever the laboratory is, whether you send it out of the office or if you have an in-house CAD designer, this is what they'll do in exocad. Now, I will also pause for a minute and explain, because this gets asked quite often, can you do this in 3Shape, which is another CAD design software? Yes, you can. It is very, very difficult to do in 3Shape because once you start a project in 3Shape, you can't change anything. So you have to go all the way through to the end. I would highly, highly not recommend doing this in 3Shape. Some of, like, for example, Blake Roney, the head of our digital team at SIN 360, formerly SIN Dental USA, it can take him on average 17 to 25 minutes to do a complete double arch in exocad. It takes anybody at best 45 minutes to do this in 3Shape. On average, it takes them over an hour. Okay. In exocad, if I'm a designer and I receive those files from the surgery room, both the photogrammetry data from the micromapper and the intraoral scan from whatever intraoral scanner you're using, this is what the scans look like, both preoperatively and postoperatively. On this screen, you'll see all the way on the right, the post-op scans have those bone fixation screws on the upper. There's 2 in the midline of the palate. On the lower, there's 2 on each retromolar pad. What we're going to do is match or stitch the post-op scans to the pre-op scans. Now, by doing that, we get the pre-op vertical. So we're stitching the post-op scans to the pre-op bite. That's how we get the proper VDO post-operatively. Now, after we do this step in exocad, this is the step here. Doing a best fit matching is what it's called for those that are familiar in exocad. We want that camouflage color look. That's the area that we're matching. We tell the software to ignore all the other parts of the scan and focus just on what we've circled here. That's the camouflage looking area. Both you can see we've got decent matches on the right side, which the retromolar pads, and then on the midline of the palate on the left side. Now from here, after they're stitched together, that's how we get this bite. This is our post-op vertical, but it's the same vertical to the pre-op bite, just without the teeth. So this is what it looks like. Now from here on the design team, what they're gonna do is pull up their digital wax up that they've already done prior to surgery based on those 2D photos or 3D face scans. That's what this is. They're adapting that digital wax up to the patient's vertical. After they've got everything situated properly, everything looks good. This is where you can overlay 2D photos and even pull in those 3D face scans if you have them. And then you can make sure the midline, cant, proportions, everything looks good. Once we like where it's at, then we proceed forward and we have to actually make sure our libraries are proper. In this case, we have a screw called the PRH30 screw. It's a $6 screw, so it's very affordable. But what's different about it is it's twice, almost 3 times as long, your stock multi-unit screw, to give more room for material, because we know that resin, zirconia, PMMA gets its strength from bolt. When you have those elongated screws, this provides more room for material, so you can eliminate the need to ever have to use a tie base. It's saving you a significant amount of money, but it's also providing a more accurate file and restoration because there's no room for human involvement. You don't have to manually cement a tie base underneath that restoration. So we want everything to go direct to multi-unit. We know it's going to fit. We know it's not going to break. There's not going to be any issues, and it's going to be extremely passive because we're using photogrammetry. So this is the screw that we use. There's a lot of screws out there. There's the Powerball screw. There's the desk screw. There's the desk 19.018. There's the Rosen screw. We have gone through all of them. This is our preferred screw. But as long as you're using the proper screw and also photogrammetry, I would highly recommend just going direct to multi-unit. After we have our library set and our screw channel set in exocad, we now stitch everything together, and then we're going to adapt that soft tissue to generate a file that looks like this. This is our SPL that we're then the lab is gonna send back to the clinical office, and this is where we're going to nest this on our printers. So most of you are probably familiar with Sprint Ray. We're very close with Sprint Ray. We are big fans of Sprint Ray because of a couple key things. They're very dependable printers. They're very simple. They're open systems. Everything we deal with is 100% open. But most importantly, we are able to get the speed extremely fast and also have a restoration that is very, very strong and FDA cleared, to where you know this restoration is not going to break when the patient leaves. So let me then go to the next slide here. Something unique, and this will be the first place that you've probably heard about it. We have been beta testing some things for Sprint Ray, which is a Pro Arch kit. It's the Pro S Arch kit. You have to have a Pro 55 Sprint Ray printer, but if you do, we can get you a special build plate and a special tank, as you see here, that we can print within 20 minutes. And again, let's come back to the importance. Our goal is to deliver a set of teeth to these patients in a very timely manner, as fast as possible, without sacrificing quality or strength. So there's a couple reasons why this is very, very appealing right now, is because they have this ability to deliver up to 3 to 4 arches on a printed scenario in under 20 minutes. And it's an FDA approved resin, which has just recently been approved for final use. So here's on the left, this is me setting up. This is quite some time ago, about a month and a half ago. We just set up the first Pro Arch kit, the Pro S Arch kit. You'll see the build plate's a little bit smaller than normal. So if you have some really wide arches, maybe you have a Shaquille O'Neal patient that comes in, it can be difficult fitting up to say 3 or 4 arches on there. But if you're repeatedly able to get at least 2 arches, no problem. Please notice again, the tank is different. So if you do have a sprint ray, the tank is much smaller than the previous tank. It is very specific to increase the speed. With the smaller build plate, it allows the printer to go up and down much faster and the resin to get underneath so you can print effectively. What's cool also about sprint ray is they notify you which tank and which resin is in the tank. It's a very smart system, so very easy to use. All right, so after we printed, we just tear off the supports. Then we're going to go ahead and clean up the restoration. We always want to cure. I don't show the process here, but when you put it in the sprint ray cure, you always want to put analogs on. This is a very key tip. It serves two purposes. One, it allows you to hold the restoration when you stain and glaze it. But number two, it forces you to put a screw through there. So we'll put the PRH30 screw to screw onto analogs, and that verifies you don't have any extra resin in that screw channel. The last thing you want is to go through the process of staining and glazing and then realizing that there's resin that's cured inside the screw channel and you can't get the screw in the restoration. So we've been through this. We do this on a routine basis, multiple cases a day. So it's we figured out all the problems early on. So we'll do a stage of staining and glazing. What we use and recommend is GC OptiGlaze for the temps. Very simple, and we can do this in under 10 minutes. And it's very easy to train your staff to do so as well. So here's the case. Immediately within 1 hour from this one was probably a little bit extra because of sedation, but generally now we're delivering teeth within 1 hour. And here's a retracted site. It does come out. If you guys do have a sprint ray and you're using the Hollywood bleach, it's a very white restoration. So if it's a single arch you're doing and you need a matched natural dentition, you really have to tone down the white. I mean, let's be honest, it's a toilet bowl white. It's very bright. So they do have in the next 2 months, they're releasing 3 more shades, B shade and A shade, and I think a C shade as well. So we're really looking forward to those shades. So here's the post-op provisionals. This is printed with Onyx bleach resin. On the finals, on this case, again, we have that 360, so we're very involved also with milling. We milled these zirconia restorations at a Pretty Denta bleach. I think the milling time is around 1 hour and 45 minutes, so we can mill them extremely fast using Hyperdent and an IMSI Core 350i Pro Plus. So this is Pretty Denta multicolor bleach. They also use GC stained porcelain for this restoration as well. It was Ignacio with Dr. Sheth who did the restoration. There's Ignacio. Let's give him some credit for the lab work. With the 350Is, we're able to mill anything you want, whether it's titanium, zirconia, you name it. So Hyperdent is also critical. And the reason I really want to highlight this is because, again, I'll speak to those power users. With Hyperdent, we're able to build the construction info file, pulling the exact geometry from the photogrammetry file. You have the most accurate, precise screw access channel. This is one of the only softwares that can do it. We are huge fans of Hyperdent. All right, so I'm going to skip through some of the milling a little bit, but the IMSI Core is what we train, sell, and support on. It is capable of milling pretty much everything you can imagine. Zirconia, Emax, titanium. With zirconia, or excuse me, with photogrammetry, the passivity is never in question anymore. It's 100% accurate on every time. Something else that we're releasing that's very unique as well is our new Zygomatic product that's coming in this year, forecasted to be. It is very important when we look at these full mouth restorations that you do have proper multi-units. Now, we have some multi-units coming out as well that are 45, 52, and 60 degrees. And that's the most part, that's kind of summed up the case. I know there's probably quite a few questions that are out there. So I wanted to try to get straight to the point. So without further ado, I guess it's probably best if we open it up to some questions. That way, if somebody's wondering something, they can still, like, for example, Dr. Liu, you asked, does Clarinav make the equipment? I have the Navident system. can the Navigant system do static photogrammetry data? So to that question, the ClearNav does make the micromapper. We consulted with ClearNav about a year and a half ago and had them make a unit in conjunction with us from scratch. They were trying to come out with a way to have an add-on system for photogrammetry to their Navigant, which they have a great Navigant system, dynamic navigation, but it's only coming out on the Evo from what I understand.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you, Patrick, for
Yes,
the
indeed.
wonderful lecture. I think this is a very exciting moment for the digital dentistry. What I see here, the digital workflow is amazing. Okay, so right now we just open to the doctor for the question. And here we have the question in the chat. It's a
Is that the one
okay.
from Dr. Liu?
Yeah, Dr. Lu.
Yeah, that's
Dr.
one I just
Chlorine,
answered with ClearNav. They do
okay,
make
okay.
the they do make the micromapper. These guys are experts with metrology. They deal with brain surgery, they deal with spine surgery, and they're using photogrammetry in all their equipment that they make. So they're some of the best in the industry by far. That's why we partnered with them. Yeah. Anybody else? I know it can be it's a lot of information. It's pretty, it can seem complex. It's actually quite simple. We've got a training team that we actually deploy out to help train offices, because once you learn it, it's the simplest thing out there. The key aspect, and I tried to harp on this in the beginning, you need to be partnered with the right lab that knows exocad or be trained on it in your office. So the key aspects are having photogrammetry and having a resource that knows exocad. You can reach out to us. We can link you up with laboratories all over the US, even outside the US, that know exocad very well. Now, what's one thing I didn't touch on here is the cost on this. The cost for the process, our cases, per arch case, for the implant side, they're around $550. Then you add the restoration for 3D printing, it costs you $12. And it's very, very cost effective for you as a practitioner or as an office to offer this once you're trained on it, because you can offer this to more patients that maybe can't afford $50,000 for a double arch, but maybe they can come up with, I don't know, 30,000 for a double or 40,000, or some people even do it less. That's to each his own on what they want to charge. But from a cost perspective, we're able to really get your cost per arch significantly down. That is a key. But we're also not sacrificing anything. We're giving you a better restoration, better quality, more accurate, and fit that is spot on. The last piece that I'll say is most of the work is done in advance. So all the restoration hard work, the VDO, the cant, the bite, the midline, all that's already done. So the only thing you need to change here is the soft tissue after the inflammation has gone down. To recapture the soft tissue, send that to your designer. They adapt it to the design. You reprint off another one. If everything looks good, you have that duplicated in zirconia or whatever your desired final restoration would be. So.
Yeah, Patrick, I saw you use the spin read on X tough resin, right?
Yes.
Okay. For that resin, so you just use that resin for the provisional restoration, right? Not for the final restoration.
Well, some things are changing recently, because you will hear soon that there's going to be an FDA release of the Onyx Tough Resin, the 2.0 shades that are coming out. They're approved for final use. So we're right at that stage where there may be a change in business models. A lot of people have thought about doing a subscription service. Maybe patients come in once a year and just get a new restoration. But yeah, today, in most of our cases, we do 3 restorations. Day of surgery print costs us $12. After the soft tissue inflammation has come down, we rescan, adapt that to the design, print off 1 more. And if everything looks good on that restoration, we just duplicate that in zirconia, and then we're done.
Okay, I saw you have the specific the tree, for the printer. That's a Spinnery sell that, or it's belong to your company.
The tank and the build plate.
I have a
Yeah.
build plate.
Yeah, the build plate, it's very new. It's not even publicly available. If people are interested in it, we can get them on an early access. It's brand new. It's not publicly available, but we do have access to it.
Okay.
We have a question here from Sharon's iPhone. So what is your total cost for surgical guide and bone reduction guide design, everything else that's needed for an all-on-X? So one thing I have to be very clear on, we do not offer design or manufacturing or anything like that. All we do is provide the dental implants, the equipment, and the training to do this. So what I would recommend is I would partner somebody up with somebody who can offer that design. They can do the design, print off your guide. If you have a Sprint Ray even has a design software where you can actually just do an AI design. And then they can print off the surgical guide. They can print off the temporary. So everything is good. You can print off your bone reduction guide there. I don't know their cost right off the top of my head, but I can't imagine it's more than $100 for a surgical guide design. So, Dr. Liu, you asked, is that build plate only for Sprint Ray 55S, not 95S? Yes, they do. It's a great question. I'm glad you asked this. Ryan mentioned it's only for the 55S. They do actually have one for the 95. However, it's very important to understand that the 95 is a 90 micron of accuracy printer. And on top of it, the setting that we print in, because you want to print fast, you print in 100 micron setting. If you have a total deviation of 90 plus 100, you're already at 190 microns of accuracy. My point is, we have tested this. We've got 10 95 printers in the back. We've got 18 55Ss. The 55 is significantly more accurate when it comes to implant restorations. We do not recommend, because we've learned this the hard way, we do not recommend the 95 for printing implant restorations, especially full arch fixed where there's multiple implants. So you can contact us, maybe Ryan or one of the team members, or even Sprint Ray. They do have trade-in programs if you wanted to trade in the 95. The 95 is amazing for big platform prints. Like, for example, the ones that we have in the back, we print off maxillary arches with full zygomas. So when we do zygomatic hands-on workshops, we can print off a really big restoration, which is the skull. But other than that, we don't use anything other than maybe dentures with the 95.
Yeah. So Patrick, you said that you offer the ISOCAD training. This is a training for the technician or for the doctor?
Good question. Yes. To be very clear, it is for the doctors. I'm sorry, it is for the technicians, but clinicians always want to come. And I will tell you the same thing that I tell all the doctors that want to come to the course. It's a very complex training. It's not feasible, and it's too complex for a doctor to do this day in, day out. Why? Because their time on investment is better treating patients than doing the design. So you can outsource it for a very low cost. That's why we highly recommend that just the technicians come. However, we have a lot of doctors I have one doctor, a friend of mine, who's got 8 technicians that work in his office. They have 8 people doing exocad design. He needs to know what the limitations of the software are so he can tell the lab techs if they say you can't do this, he can say, no, you can do this and I know how. But doing it on a day in, day out basis, it can be it's basically like if you were going to stop practicing. I will say this, it's not like a CEREC machine where you can do a couple clicks to generate a single crown. There's some complex steps to it. That's why we have a 3-day immersive training workshop. We've got the best computers in the industry that we change every 6 months. We've got the best versions of exocad, so everybody gets the best of the best setup. And we have some of the best trainers on the globe. We have people that come in from the UK, Australia, all over Latin America. But we highly recommend that it's just for technicians, just so it's so the expectations are set properly. Now, clinicians do come. So what is the availability of the training? The entire process. If it's the entire process, we have a digital team that will actually come in. If you get the equipment from us, they come in and train you and your team on site. It's very important to do that because it's not just taking the photogrammetry scan or how you capture the intraoral scan, but it's also training the assistants. How do they stain and glaze? What colors do they use? All the little details, that's the key to the whole thing. Making sure that when they cure the Onyx Tough and the Cure, that they screw analogs into the PRH30s. All the little steps, those are the key to a successful operation here. So we offer training on site and we offer training at our headquarters, and we do have the exocad courses. The exocad courses, I think we're sold out until November. You can check the website at SIN Dental USA, but I'm pretty sure it's November's the soonest availability. Next question from Dr. Sue, is it compatible with other implant systems such as Dentsply Astra implants? Another great question. So when I'm assuming you're referring to the specific photogrammetry components. So the photogrammetry device, the micro mapper, it doesn't matter what implant system you are. However, you are limited to what's considered the Nobel standard multi-unit platform. So if your multi-unit system is a 4.8 millimeter platform, Nobel Biocare, BioHorizons, SIN, Neodent, 3i, most out there are. The Dentsply Astra, I would have to check on the multi-unit platform. I think their screw is a 1.6, but I would have to verify. So I'm not 100% sure on the Dentsply Astra multi-unit. It's been a while. I would check if it's a 4.8 platform with a 1.4 screw, it will work, no questions asked. Even if you're still using Dentsply Astra implants, you can, is some reason if their multi-units are not compatible, Dest offers a multi-unit that fits all implants, including Astra, that has a 4.8 multi-unit platform as well. That's probably the most common standard platform on the market. Next is which scanner picks up soft tissue the best in case of shallow vestibule and hemorrhage? Yeah, you're exactly. You have to, it's very, very important. So the first answer to your question is this. Make sure you have a laptop or a desktop that has a graphics card that's an RTX NVIDIA 3080 or better. That's the first thing. So it could be a 3080, a 3090, a 4090 or 4080, but it cannot be less than that. So it's very important. In addition to that, make sure you have minimum of 32 gigabytes of RAM. So we'll go into an office and they'll have a Shining 3D wireless, one of the brand new ones, or a Trios 5, and they'll scan and say, it's just not scanning fast enough or something's wrong. We'll check their specs on their computer. Immediately when we plug them into a new laptop with the same exact scanner, it performs night and day difference better. So a lot of times people don't have to buy another scanner. They just need to upgrade their computer. So that's the first thing we check. Some reason if there's something wrong with the scanner, but in regards to the brands, Trios scans great. Shining 3D scans amazing. The triangle density count for Shining and Trios are the two best that we found. Medit is also strong. Medit's a great scanner. The only issue with Medit is there's a lot of buttons, so the assistants can get a little bit confused, but Medit is a great scanner as well. When you get into the iTero, which scans great as well, iTero just auto stitches suture or tissue out of the way. That's the only problem with iTero. It's hard to capture long spans of soft tissue. TeraStream, I would not recommend for this application. It's a great scanner, but for post-op scans, lots of blood, long spans of no teeth where it's all soft tissue, it's very challenging to use. Any comments on the latest Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I saw you have a case. You use your own multi-unit screw. It's longer than the regular, so
Yes.
that means that the design is different, right?
Yes, it is. Yes.
So
It's a
you
good
have
question.
the you have the library, your company, so we can use your library to design that.
Yes, we have almost any library that you need. If you need custom libraries, our digital team can usually make those the same day. We have a very advanced
Okay.
digital team, so any libraries you need, we can make them for you if we don't have them. We have almost every library you could think of. Yeah,
Okay, another question. The implant I saw is that's good. So no, we are plan to have the next ON-X training in Guatemala with Dr. Shui. So my question is, your implant interface is the same with the Zimmer? Or what
No,
can no just
no,
unique?
it's unique. Yeah, the closest interface to it would be Neodent. Yeah.
Or close to the new dent. Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
We have a few more questions here. If I use the 1.6 millimeter screw, can the micromapper scan body work with the 1.6 size? Great question. No, because the Clarinav can clarify this. We are in the process of developing a 1.6 screw scan body. I can't give you a date because I don't know. But the reason that you can't is because every little specific room for detail, room for error has been factored into the micromapper. Micromapper, again, is the only entity that's been approved by both FDA, DSAP, Health Canada. So they have checked every single aspect of the manufacturing, the calibration, everything. So there's no room for detail for any, or no room for gaps or any error. So the multi-unit scan bodies, it's a precise screw channel where the screw goes inside. So there's no wiggle room. It's just perfect and passive. So it's very, it's not loose enough for a 1.6 is my point. But yeah, stay in touch with us. We will keep you posted. We will have a market release once those scan bodies out for the 1.6. Any comments on the latest steric intraoral prime scan? The prime scan's a great, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this. The prime scan is a great scanner as well. We do use this. A lot of our customers have the prime scan. What's also unique about prime scan, everybody thinks it's locked because it's on a cart. A lot of our offices, we can actually tap into the computer, download the micromapper scan software on the computer, and actually use that prime scan computer for both the intraoral scan and the micromapper scan. So thank you for asking that question about the prime scan. It's a great scanner and it does work well here. In one CE course, it was mentioned that the shorter scan body, the better for scan result. Does that matter in your scan body? No, it does not. In fact, we actually increased, we're on the version 3 of our scan bodies. So everybody in the past, all the couple hundred scanners that we sold this year, everybody at the end of this month is getting a free set of scan bodies because we came out with a brand new design. Now, the new design is actually a little bit taller and it's very specific, not just to scan more accurately, but it's specific because it pushes up just a little bit higher than the soft tissue is. So there's no blood doesn't get on top, or if you don't remove enough tissue, it doesn't cover the top of it. So it doesn't matter. It's all about the calibration and the camera and the software that they use. That's where the accuracy comes in. So I actually just got a text message here about a question about the OptiSplint. OptiSplint is an alternative to photogrammetry. With OptiSplint, we tested it. We actually had video cameras going on in our R&D room. So we recorded every single step. We have scanned multiple. We have a model that's calibrated to 3 to 5 microns. So we know that each multi-unit, there's 6 of them on the model, is within 3 to 5 microns of accuracy. And we have this file, and that is our baseline. What we used that model for, we did 2 scans, one with photogrammetry and the micromapper scan bodies, and then one with the OptiSplint where you lewd the scan bodies together, take it off, rescan it, and then you use that for your implant positions. The maximum deviation of one scan body, the most that was outside of the baseline, on the micromapper was 12 microns. So if that model is potentially 5 microns of accuracy off, the maximum that multi-unit would be off from the file that's scanned on the micromapper is roughly around 17 microns of accuracy. So it's still very much in the clinical zone, clinically acceptable zone. On the OptiSplint, the most deviated scan body was 121. So if you add 5 to that, or even minus 5 from that, you're still at around 120 plus or minus microns of accuracy just on that scan. That was also just on a model that was not on a patient. So you add the tongue, cheeks, blood, it makes it even more complex. So all right, we've got a few other costs for the micromapper. It's around 35,000 for the micromapper. I think Ryan released a promotion for this month that it's we have 12 months, 0% financing. It is in stock as well. Is Formlabs Print able to print the temp prosthesis? Yes, Formlabs is. Now, it's not necessarily the printer that's important. It is for us because we know we need to do it in 20 minutes, but what's key is the resin. So what I highly recommend is using SprintRay's resin if you can get the parameter set with XYZ axis in the Formlabs printer. That's the most important step. The key is to make sure that it's cured properly and it doesn't compromise the strength. That's what's important to us. Historically, even though we don't sell the Einstein and SprintRay have been the best in the market as far as speed, resin, so on and so forth. But with the recent release of SprintRay's resin, the Onyx Tough, and then their new shades that are coming out, we are kind of leaning towards SprintRay a lot more, as this is the best alternative. It's also the best for the costs as well. What is the training option you have for doctors if you want to implement your equipment? The training option is 2. We have clinicians on staff that do not practice privately. They work for us full time. We can send them out to your office to do a full training with your office. That's probably the best way to do it. You can include all of that just by getting the equipment, and yeah. So all you have to do is just you can contact us at the website SINDentalUSA.com. You can fill out a form. You can we can actually put something together to show you exactly what it looks like and then what the schedule looks like. I think right now we're around 3 weeks out. So the soonest we could book a new training would be 3 to 4 weeks. Okay.
Okay.
Some good questions.
Okay.
It sounds like you have a knowledgeable group here asking the right stuff about the screw channels and libraries. I mean, it's good stuff. I want to thank everybody for their attention. It's a very exciting time right now. I am super excited about the next couple of years because it's becoming easier, more predictable with all the technology and digital equipment. So, Dr. Zhang,
Okay,
thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for Patrick, the wonderful lecture. Okay, hope in future we have more some the lecture, even the training like this. So, and thank you, Ryan. Thank you, every doctor. Okay, have a good night. We stop here. Okay, bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Here.
Have a good night.
Good night.